able to reduce the level of AMR. Thank you.
Fine on.
Government bills. This Council resumes the second reading debate on the extension of Government Leases Bill. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Chairman of the Bills Committee on the bill, will first address the Council on the committee's report. Mr. Jeffrey Lam. Thank you, President. As the Chairman of the Bills Committee on the Extension of Government Leases Bill, I now report the salient points of the committee's work to the Council. The bill seeks to provide for the extension of government leases and related matters with a view to establishing a new standing statutory mechanism for the extension of general-purpose leases expiring from 2025 onwards. The bill also contains specific provisions for dealing with applicable leases where foreign-related entities are involved. Members generally support the bill to establish a standing mechanism for the Director of Lands to extend applicable leases in a streamlined and orderly manner, in place of the existing arrangement whereby the government has to execute a new lease with each and every owner. There has been an in-depth discussion on the issue of the government's sole discretion. Some members have requested the administration to consider making reference to the 1997 Land Policy Paper and stipulating in the bill that the government may at its sole discretion extend leases, so as to provide a clear legal basis for ensuring that such discretion will not be undermined. The administration has advised that the government has been handling the lease extension matters for non-renewable leases in accordance with the 1997 Land Policy. As the land agent of the government, the Director is empowered to make various decisions in respect of government leases. As far as lease extension is concerned, Article 123 of the Basic Law provides that where leases of land without a right of renewal expire after the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, they shall be dealt with in accordance with laws and policies formulated by the Hong Kong SAR on its own. The administration has emphasized that the bill merely changes the means through which leases are extended, and has no implications on the 1997 Land Policy or the government's sole discretion. In order to deliver a clear and positive message to the market, the Bills Committee requested the administration to give an undertaking when the bill resumes second reading debate, stating that the government may at its sole discretion extend non-renewable leases, and that the government in general will extend general-purpose leases, except where individual leases should not be extended on public interest considerations. The administration has undertaken to make the pledge. Members observed that the bill does not provide a clear definition of special purpose leases or SPLs, and the extension of SPLs will not be arranged in accordance with the mechanism under the bill. To ensure the continuity and certainty of the government's land policy, members are of the view that the bill should cover SPLs whose extension do not require case-by-case review. Moreover, some members have suggested the administration to set out all the SPLs in respect of which the administration will need to take into account the prevailing policy considerations each time when it considers whether to extend leases, and the criteria and factors based on which the government defines SPLs. The administration has explained that SPLs refer to leases granted, disposed of, or modified on specific policy considerations for designated uses. Due to the diverse contents and conditions of SPLs, it is difficult to include in the bill an exhaustive list on the criteria or considerations for covering all SPLs in a foolproof manner. For each extension, there is a need to consider whether to extend the leases, taking into account the prevailing policy considerations. Even if the leases are to be extended, extended, it may also be necessary to amend the original lease conditions so as to better achieve the relevant policy objectives. The administration considers that it will be more appropriate to continue handling matters relating to the extension of SPLs individually in accordance with the established mechanism, where the government and the lessees will negotiate conditions and execute lease extension documents in the form of contracts in each case with mutual consent. An owner may opt out from lease extension by delivering an opt-out memorandum. The Bills Committee considers that choosing not to accept lease extension is a serious and important decision, and has suggested that the administration should consider adding the requirement that a memorandum shall be signed by a witness. Suggestions were also made on protecting the rights of persons who are not party to such memorandums, including mortgagees. Having considered members' views, the administration proposes to add a requirement that a memorandum shall be signed by a witness who is a practicing solicitor. The solicitor witness shall be responsible for verifying the identity documents or the signees and explaining to the signees the contents of the memorandum and the legal consequences. The administration also proposes to include a warranty clause in the memorandum and empower the courts to vacate a memorandum in order to safeguard the rights of relevant persons who are not party to the memorandum. The Bills Committee welcomes the administration's proposals. The Bills Committee notes that an amendment will be moved to designate the 5th of July 2024 as the commencement date of the ordinance, in lieu of the Secretary separately appointing a date by notice published in the Gazette. Certain clauses are amended as per the Bills Committee's suggestions, while consequential amendments are made to other ordinances. The Bills Committee agrees with the administration's amendments. President, the following are my personal views on the bill. Transparent, open, and fair land policy with continuity can boost the confidence of markets. This is important for land development and also the economy. Now, through the bill, the government will establish a new mechanism, a standing mechanism, to extend the government's leases in an orderly manner. According to information, between June next year and 29th of June 2047, some 2,400 lots will expire. Now, by the 30th of June 2047, leases of some 1.5 million lots will expire. Or rather, 300,000 lots will expire. It involves some 1.5 million title owners. Now, on the 30th of June 2047, in that year, some 1.5 million title owners will have their leases expired. This bill can alleviate the so-called 2047 anxiety among title owners. It is just changing the way through which government leases are extended, that is, by way of an extension notice published on Gazette rather than executing contracts one by one. The bill will greatly enhance the efficiency of lease extension and also save manpower costs and enhance the certainty of the market and boost the investors' confidence. Now, with this legal basis, the banking sector will be reassured when they grant loans for real estate investment. There are long-term benefits to the bill. After the introduction of the bill into the Council, I was told by chambers of commerce and foreign investors. Now, when I introduced or explained the bill to a foreign investor, they told me that this is a great news about Hong Kong's autonomy and freedom being extended for another 30 years. Now, I am very confident that under one country, two systems, Hong Kong will continue to uphold the principle of high autonomy enjoyed by Hong Kong people, and the prosperity will last much longer beyond 2047. Now, I thank the administration for moving this bill, and I also thank the efforts of the Bills Committee and members, and as well as the Secretariat, Mr. Ambrose Lam.
President, there is a saying in Chinese, it is only with land that we can generate wealth. Over the past centuries, politically, economically, and in terms of livelihood and social development, everything has to do with land. So this extension of government leases bill is an attempt to address the issues arising from history. The extension would only happen in decades, and this is an important attempt on the part of the government to address the issue. Let me say a little bit about the history first for the record, and also we're witnessing this important moment. Under the British rule, there have been a lot of different land administration systems in parallel. Now, by this, I mean the land in Hong Kong is governed by multiple legislation regarding land dues, extension of land leases, and so on. Now, we talk about the rent. This is about the north of Boundary Street, and also the leases granted in Hong Kong and Kowloon after 1985, and under Cap 515 regarding the rent and collection of rent for the land. We also have the land dues in Hong Kong other than the land rent. These apply to the land in Hong Kong and Kowloon before 1985, and also the Chou Tong land under Cap 125. The land, the rent apportionment ordinance, that this is in fact payment of rent to the government, rather at different times for different locations. We have different terminologies. The anti-indigenous villages have to pay the land dues, and for the land lease, we have 175 plus 25, 99 years, 999 years, and also permanent leases. In 1989, the Qing government leased the NT to the UK for 99 years. A lot of the NT leases before the handover on the 30th of July 1997, they expired, and under joint declaration, Annex 3, the NT lease extension ordinance was enacted, and for the leases that expire on the 31st of June 1997 will be extended to 2047. And that has addressed the lease issue and ensure the stability and prosperity of Hong Kong. I've got three reasons to show that this legislation is marking a milestone in the development of Hong Kong. First, this has confirmed that on the 31st of June 2047, the leases expired on that day will be extended for 50 years. So after 50 years, there will be an extension of another 50 years, and so on. Under the NT leases extension ordinance, 300,000 leases were automatically extended to the 31st of June 2047. Now, what's going to happen after that date? This is something that is exercising the minds of many investors. This legislation ensures that there will be extension continuously, and there will be 50 years of no change. There will be more than 50 years. Beyond 2047, the system will continue, and this is the cornerstone for the prosperity and stability for Hong Kong. This will inspire confidence on the part of the investors because of the certainty. Second, this also marks an important revamp of the system. This has streamlined the rent system, and this also addressed the issue of the huge number of leases that expire come 2025. Previously, the government has to resort to contractual terms to discuss with the lessees all the extensions and execute new leases. This is very cumbersome a process. The government has to handle a huge number of leases, and this is becoming an impossible task. So the bill seeks to set up a streamlined and orderly mechanism. Unless the lease is in the non-extension list, it will be automatically extended without the payment of premium. This will save an awful lot of time, and this will ensure that the majority of the leases will be extended. Third, the leases will be standardized. Under the bill, the leases that will expire will be incorporated into the bill. And in the CSAs, the rent, the ordinance will also be extended, and the ordinance will not be applicable to the rent upon the passage of bill, and that would narrow all the differences, and there will be a standardized system going forward. Now, under this bill, subject to the passage of this bill, I hope that the government will be mounting more publicity to the public and to the international investors. Before 1997, there were the leases issues and property prices issues that caused so many anxieties, and people, many professionals, let go of their properties on the cheap and left Hong Kong. And they didn't expect that the economy would be doing so good. I don't think they will be able to acquire back the property that they disposed of in those days if they come back to Hong Kong. I hope that the government would mount publicity on this bill. This is a good thing. We have to make sure that everybody knows about it. Under the one country, two systems with 50 years of no change, the system will remain. And I hope that the government will also publicize this to the rest of the world about the mechanism of this new system. The overseas system is vastly different from Hong Kong. In the UK, when the leases expire, the piece of land would be returned to the landlord. So when the leases are approaching expiry, the property prices would depreciate as time goes by because of all the uncertainties. Of course, there can be negotiation with the lessees, but there is a need to pay the premium. In Hong Kong, there is a housing estate, and they will have to negotiate the premium with the landlord. In the overseas investors are not well up in the system in Hong Kong. They see this expiry date in 2047. They'll be thinking with the mindset of overseas investors. They would think that the property or that the land will be depreciating, and they're wary of this system. I think we have to do more publicity to make sure that people would know that there would be continuous extension without the payment of premium. And unless on a piece of land, the piece of land is used for special purposes or belong to the foreign consulate, they will be extended. I think we have to inspire confidence on the part of the investors. As a member of the Bills Committee, I have to heap praise on the fellow members and administration for scrutinizing this bill over the past 6 months to make sure that this is going to be a historic revamp of the lease system in Hong Kong. I urge members to support the bill and all the CSAs. Ms. Carmen Khan. Mr. Deputy, I am a member of the Bills Committee on this bill. Under BL 123, where leases of land without a right of renewal expire, the Hong Kong SAR government will be dealing with them in accordance with the law and formulated by its own. And we have the 1997 land policy formulated. Leases not containing a right of renewal except the STT and SPLs. When they expire, they may be extended for a term of 50 years without the payment of an additional premium, but an annual rent equivalent of 3% of the rateable value will have to be paid, and that's the rent. The 1997 land policy doesn't specify the end time. Now we're dealing with a residential, commercial, and industrial land, and these are the general purpose lease or leases. Now, by the time they expire, how we can deal with this, and this has to do with the government revenue as well as the public interests. And this is the focus of the bill. The government is of the view that the Lands Department is executing leases with individual lessees, and this proves to be cumbersome. They're citing the Poffolam Garden as an example, and this is not sufficiently effective to deal with all the leases that expire in June 2025. The chair of the Bills Committee has touched on this. I don't propose to repeat all the numbers. So the government is enacting a piece of legislation to put in place a standing statutory mechanism to extend such leases. The government emphasized that the 1997 land policy is also part of the policy, but during this scrutiny, we are saying that with the 1997 land policy, if we codify this may not be just a change of the lease extension. Now, during the Bills Committee, I've made a lot of recommendations. I'd like to focus my speech on 3 points. First, regarding the applicability, now whether this bill will apply to all leases all over Hong Kong, in Kowloon, Hong Kong, and NT. I said at the Bills Committee that there can be different angles that the government can approach this issue. In 1998, we enacted the anti-leases extension ordinance, Cap 150. All the leases in NT from the 27th of June 1997 to be extended to the 2047. There are 39 years left to go. We are suggesting that with this mechanism, can we consider implementing this for land beyond the NT? Now, there is still land that hasn't been developed in NT farm, also then in Hong Kong and Kowloon. Now, if this has become mature, then we can incorporate the NT land into the system. However, the administration said that in order to secure public confidence, they have explained that this would be applicable to all the leases instead of excluding the NT leases for later stage. I hope that when the government considers public interest, the government would be given the power to do so. Second, the absolute discretion on the part of the government. The government said that the 1997 land policy is was put together by the Executive Council. Now, the government is using this policy as the basis for lease extension, and this is appropriate policy. In the electrical brief and also at the meeting, the administration said that they could exercise their discretion on the basis of the 1997 land policy to decide on the land lease extension. And normally, they will extend the leases unless there is public interest consideration, like serious violation of the leases despite warnings. In the bill, the absolute discretion or the decision taken as a landlord or the private law domain has not been incorporated into the bill. There are certain leases that will not be extended because of public interest consideration. All these have not been entered into the bill. We urge the administration to do something about it because this would give rise to disputes. Clause 12 refers to the fact that for the general purpose leases and not on the non-extension lists, these extension will be on a continuous basis. In the legislative brief and also at the Bills Committee, and also Clause 12 of the bill may give rise to some unreasonable expectation that the government would be extending the leases. President, we've analyzed all these. Are there any uncertainties with regard to the bill? That the administration confirmed the Clause 521 seeks to address all these issues. These provisions provide that the non-extension lists and these are not a part of subsidiary legislation, and there is no need for LegCo to look at these under the negative vetting system. Now, Clause 21 shows that the government is exercising absolute discretion as a landlord. Now, because of all these comments, the government has given the undertaking that during the second reading debate, the government will be explaining the sole discretion on the part of the government. They are exercising the power as a landlord, and all the elaborations will be made. Third, regarding to multiple extension without payment of premium, Clause 12 provides that the extension of 50 years without payment of premium, that's what I call the Clause 12 arrangement. During scrutiny, I know that there are different views in the community. The administration said that in the lease extension, this would provide a continuous and certain mechanism. This represents a suitable arrangement. So this is conducive to the mortgages extended by the banks that would provide certainty. But I hope that I can state all the divergent views. Now, there are some divergent views. The Clause 12 arrangement covers broad implications, covering a long period of time. The stakeholders do not cover the individuals that own the commercial interests, and this also concern the individuals and enterprises that don't own any land. Thus, it comply with BL 7 of the Basic Law, and that is the land and resources belong to the state, and they are managed, developed, and used by the Hong Kong SAR government, and they are leased to individuals and corporations, and the revenue will belong to the government. The thing is, if we do not limit to the number of extensions without the payment of premium, will this minimize the government's revenue, thus compromising the public resources for land development, for the rental housing development and infrastructure? Some FTU members wrote to the chairman that this no payment of premium arrangement would give people the impression that there would be continuous extension of the leases. And they are suggesting that this arrangement be amended. The administration hasn't adopted these ideas because they are of the view that the annual rent would be collected during extension, and the extension is not without any costs. And this bill doesn't actually affect the government's absolute discretion as the landlord, and this doesn't constitute the idea of perpetual extension of the lease. I hope the administration will have regard to the actual circumstances. If there is any justification for amendment, I hope that they will leave this to the future administration to handle. And I hope that we have to be answerable and responsible for that.
Mr. Dennis Leung, Deputy President, I speak in support of the extension of government's leases bill. I am one of the members of the Bills Committee. Now, after the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR on the 1st of July 1997, the sovereignty returns to the PRC. Now, Articles 105 and 6 are two important pieces of articles protecting private property rights. Article 6 enshrines the protection for private properties. Article 105 protects the ownership and inheritance of private properties, and also the compensation for landowners whose premises are resumed by the government. So extension of government's leases will affect the confidence of the market, so we need to adopt the same approach in handling all the cases. The administration claims that under the existing mechanism, renewal or extension of leases must be conducted by way of execution of a new lease. Starting from 2025, leases of a lot of lands will expire. New leases will have to be executed. Under the existing mechanism, it is impossible to deal with such a large amount of lease extension cases. A more streamlined and effective mechanism must be formulated, that is, to provide for a new mechanism for extension of leases by operation of law. Now, the bill empowers the Director of Lands to publish an extension notice in the Gazette, and there is no need to execute a new lease. Now, according to the basic law, the government, Article 123, the government must formulate its own procedures to extend the leases of land without the right of renewal, which expired after the establishment. Now, the New Territories Leases Extension Ordinance, enacted in 1988, allows the leases to be renewed for 50 years without requiring a premium. However, a 3% land rent, according to the prevailing market rate, has to be paid. Now, Cap 150 was enacted before the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR. It gives legal effect to the extension of New Territories leases from the expiry on the 27th of June 1997 to the 30th of June 2047. This bill models upon the New Territories Leases Extension Ordinance to make possible the renewal of leases by provision of law. Now, the government reiterates that the bill only changes the way through which government's leases are extended, that is, by way of publication of notice on Gazette without execution of new leases. It will not impact upon the principle of the 1997 land policy. Now, the government reiterated that the 1997 land policy, including the absolute decision exercised by the government on land on lease extension, and also the sole discretion enjoyed by the government, will not change. However, land resources are scarce in Hong Kong. Grassroots people are waiting for an allocation of PRH. And even for the middle class, the increase in their salary cannot catch up with inflation. They can't afford private housing. So many people are switching to the public or subsidized housing market. Now, the self-constrained mindset will impact upon our competitiveness. Now, the leases allowed to be extended will be for a period of 50 years. And also, the owner only need to pay an annual rent of 3% of the prevailing market rate. I'm worried that it will become effectively permanent extension of leases. Essentially, the lessee would enjoy lease extension indefinitely. The lessees would become the actual landowner. Now, I suggested the government to protect the HKSAR's rights by including a clause that premium must be paid, but it may affect the stability of the market and the confidence of the investors. Having listened to the administration explanation, I agree with the government's proposal. We should avoid any inconsistencies between the new mechanism and the old mechanism. So based on the consideration of sustainable development and the economy, I agree with the government's proposal, which will ensure consistency and certainty for the markets and investors. It will enhance the stability of our economy and the housing market. Now about clause 13 at brackets 5, that is the calculation of compensation. That is the denominator in the fraction were greater by 50 than that specified in the applicable lease. I have problem with this fraction. Now the extension is 50 years. Now it may give rise to a misunderstanding in calculation and lead to a loss of the government. So we need to specify clearly. For multiple extension, we need to specify it clearly in the clause. Now I thank the government for accepting my proposal to amend the bill so that the fraction is spelled out more clearly in calculating the compensation. Now it will be amended as follows. Now if the lease is extended more than once, then the denominator has to be adjusted accordingly. So this would avoid the situation where the numerator is greater than the denominator. As I am a maths teacher, that's why I'm very particular about the fraction. Now there will be a heavy workload in the future, and the government must be very careful in handling extension of leases. There may be cases where the landowner cannot be found. So I suggest the government to enhance education, updating of computer systems and training so that the work of extension of leases can be completed smoothly. I also hope that the government will play its role as a gatekeeper for extension of leases so that members of the public can enjoy a sense of happiness and fulfillment from the government's land policy. Now, the government must have its own land reserve and properties so that the rent level can be adjusted. It will ensure that different industry can continue to operate without being affected by unreasonable rent. Now, during the economic downturn, the landowner refused to lower the rent, so what's being lowered is our salaries. I so submit. Dr. Wendy Hung. Thank you, Deputy President. Earlier on, I was asked by some secondary school students who visited Latchco. I was asked, among the bills I was involved in, which one leaves the deepest impression? I think this is among the top three. Now, in 1997, under the one country, two systems principle, Hong Kong was returned to the country. Everything will remain unchanged for 50 years. Now we are already past the halfway post. We are approaching 2047. Investors are thinking, where will we be after 2047? What about the leases which will expire after that? What about bank mortgages and investment plans? Will they continue beyond 2047? Now, I think this bill is a landmark bill. Since the reunification with the country, 25 leases extension were approved by the government. However, on the 30th of June 2047, there will be leases of around 300,000 lots expiring on the same day. With such a significant amount of leases, will they be extended? What about those which will not be extended? Now, this impacts upon where Hong Kong will be after year 2047. Now, thankfully, we have the answer. Now, President Xi mentioned on the 1st of July anniversary that the one country, two systems is a good principle which must be adhered to in the long run. This is significant. It has effectively removed the limits of 2047. It restores the confidence of investors. Now, we must deal with the issues arising from year 2047 nonetheless. The first priority is extension of government leases. Now, the bill we are scrutinizing today is a bill which provides for a new mechanism for extension of leases by operation of law. That is, through publication of extension notices in the Gazette to extend the leases, without requiring execution of new lease with the owners and the government. Now, this is a historical landmark. Now, I'm honored to be a member of the Bills Committee and was involved in the entire process. Subject to the passage of this bill, it will be gazetted on the 5th of July 2024. This is a new page for one country, two systems. There are several key provisions in the bill. First of all, the Director of Land will be empowered to publish extension notice in the Gazette to automatically renew the government's leases without the need of a new lease. Now, except for short-term tenancies and special purpose leases for the purpose of education and charity purposes, for general purpose leases, unless there is an encumbrance or other special situations, the general purpose leases will be extended by 50 years automatically without paying premium. The only requirement is a 3% annual rent according to the prevailing market rate. Now, qualified leases will be extended indefinitely for an unlimited time. This ensures the continuity of leases. However, in terms of compensation, it would be linked with the duration of lease fulfilled. In other words, the more time the lease is extended and the longer the lease was granted, the lower the compensation would be. I think this is very reasonable. It has balanced the rights between the government as a landlord and the lessees. Now, another highlight is foreign-related entities, for example, consular, missions, and so on. There are some 100 properties owned by foreign-related entities. According to the bill, if there are no contravention to the contracts, the leases will be extended. However, 60 days prior to the expiry of the lease, the entities must make a submission or application with the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Hong Kong. It highlights the sovereignty enjoyed by the country under one country, two systems. Now, there are some 20,000 special purpose leases for public transport purposes and education. They need to be renewed individually under the old mechanism. Interestingly, there are some 4,000 lots enjoying 999 years of lease. It is virtually indefinite. Now, since the reunification, 2 lots were not renewed because the owners could not be found. Now, there are views that allowing the leases to be extended for 20 years without a premium would be favoring the business sector. I beg to differ. Now, the general purpose leases are crucial to the livelihood of people. Now, whether a premium is needed has significance on the value of assets owned by individual households. And the continuity of our land policy will affect the faith in the one country, two systems principle. And also extension of lease does not come without cost. Now, a member of the public called me a few days ago to express their view on this. They owned a plot of land for running an NGO. The next year, they need to prepare a financial statement for the NGO. Now, it has everything to do with the number of usable years of the lot. Now, under the traditional mechanism, the government would negotiate with the lessee and come up with new lease conditions. So there is great uncertainty to this. Whether the lease would be renewed is subject to the sole discretion and the absolute decision of the government. That's why actuaries and accountants would take a conservative approach. That is, year 2047 would be used as the basis for calculating the value of the lot. Now, the member of the public saw my article on newspaper and they called me. They said that the bill greatly enhanced the business sector's confidence in one country, two systems, and they are encouraged. Now, this view highlights how important this bill is for the success of one country, two systems. So after the passage of the bill, I suggest the government providing more training and education to the sector, the public, and even the world, so that everyone understands the new mechanism of extension of leases and ensure that the valuation of land would be in compliance with the new mechanism. This will strengthen investors and members of the public's confidence in Hong Kong. Now, during the scrutiny process of the bill, the government's team was professional and responsible, and I applaud them. Now, this is a milestone, and I hope this bill will be passed. I shall submit.
Mr. Tong Li-Chie. Thank you, Deputy President. Many leases in Hong Kong will expire. Some will expire in the next few years, others closer to 2047. How we grapple with that has been a matter of public concern. The government's estimates say that from now to 2047, we will have more than 10,000 leases due to expire, and we have to deal with those leases. Today, we are resuming the second reading resumption of the Extension of Government Leases Bill. This bill seeks to create a new mechanism for extending leases. The Director of Lands will be empowered to publish extension notices in the Gazette. Those notices will extend the leases that will expire. That will replace the current practice of having to negotiate with each and every landowner and execute new leases. The bill's arrangement will save manpower and also resources in the administrative process. This bill will also streamline the land extension mechanism, and we will be able to cope with the large number of expiring leases. There will be a negative list approach. This means only leases denied extension will be set out one by one on a non-extension list. As for other leases, they get extended for 50 years with no additional premium required, though those owners will have to pay an annual government rent equivalent to 3% of the property's rateable value. Some people think the government gets to keep the sole discretion over land extension, and they wonder where the legal basis is for such an arrangement. The government said it has always stuck to the 1997 land policy when it comes to how to deal with leases not to be extended. The Director of Lands acts on behalf of the government on land extension matters. The Director can extend or not extend or terminate a lease when it's a government lease. This bill simply changes the way a lease is extended. It does nothing to change the sole discretion of the Director of Lands over land extension. We keep this discretion so that we can forestall any unintended consequences. When the director exercises their power, they have to do it in a rational and consistent manner. Otherwise, there will be judicial review challenges. Others argue if there were multiple cases of breaches of these conditions, say unauthorized building works, breach of the intended use, people wonder whether the government will exercise its sole discretion in denying the extension of such leases. I think when there are serious breaches of these conditions and the perpetrator sticks to it their own way, the director should approach such cases cautiously. There are existing laws on the occupation of government land, unauthorized building works, such as the Buildings Ordinance, the Town Planning Ordinance, and there are also provisions on resuming the land. But there is massive room for improvement in the enforcement of such ordinances. The government should review this aspect, and that is reviewing the success and extent of enforcement efforts. Before 1997, the Hong Kong government back then had to contend with leases expiring on or before the 30th of June 1997. In 1988, the government back then enacted the New Territories Leases Extension Ordinance. That ordinance fixed the problem of leases at that time. Many leases will expire by 2047. Now the government has proposed this bill. I welcome this bill. Many leases will be expiring by the end of June 2047. This bill sets out a clear arrangement on what we would do. This removes uncertainty. This helps stakeholders plan for the future. People won't have to worry about their properties. There will be no more uncertainty about mortgages. This maintains stability in the business environment. With the negative list approach, people will see the extension notices 6 years before a lease expires. The government is being responsive to the market. I support this approach. I support the second and third reading of this bill and all the government's amendments. Mr. Andrew Lam. Deputy President, in recent years, many people worried about the leases expiring in 2047. People may wonder whether they have to pay additional premiums for the properties they live in, whether they will have problems with bank mortgages. So people cannot help worrying. There will be many leases that will expire. By the 30th June 2047, 300,000 leases will expire on that one day, involving more than 1.5 million owners. Sticking to the original approach means the government will have to execute a new lease with each and every owner. If we stick to that approach, even if we double the civil service, that won't work. A huge volume of work is coming up. The old approach is inefficient for both the government and the owners. Any mistake comes up, we will see disastrous consequences. That warrants a new approach so that we can deal with the large number of leases expiring. With this bill, we will see an efficient way forward. But above all, we can reassure the people and the community as a whole. So I support this bill. This bill says that the Director of Lands will have to put out notices in the Gazette, extension notices and non-extension lists at least 6 years before the leases expire. And this means a negative list approach. I'm a member of the Bills Committee. The government puts on two hats in lease extension. The government, first of all, is a landowner, and it also enforces the land lease conditions. Those are administrative conditions. On breach of lease conditions such as town planning and building management ordinances, the government also enforces these rules, and it's important to distinguish between these two kinds of roles. The bill focuses on the terms of lease and also the conditions and also the basis for extension. Much of the farmland in the new territories comes with no conditions. This bill will empower the Director of Lands, and this means giving more enforcement powers to the Director of Lands. In a similar way, the town planning ordinance and the buildings ordinance also give powers to the respective officials. This bill gives government officials to exercise those powers when necessary. When a change of land use or unauthorized building works are involved, the buildings ordinance and the town planning ordinance will come in. When those two ordinances don't work or those officials cannot get the work done, and only then the Director of Buildings and the Director of Planning will come to the Director of Lands. So this bill is simply supplementary in nature, providing extra powers. For those two ordinances, some land uses are tolerated. Some structures, including unauthorized building works, are tolerated. I wonder whether the Director of Lands will also be able to enforce the laws. In those cases, the government said there would be no inconsistency. So existing letters tolerating those structures will remain in place and valid. So pre-existing structures will be fine. On the basis of power, the Bills Committee had a thorough discussion. The government stressed time and again that this bill is about creating a standing statutory mechanism for the Director of Lands to take a streamlined and efficient approach to extend leases. This bill simply changes the way leases are extended. It does nothing to alter the 1997 land policy. There is no change to the sole discretion the government has over extension of leases. I agree that the government should have discretion over whether a lease is extended. I also agree with Mr. Jeffrey Lam about the point about whether it's about a private law or public law. Court judgments show this question is determined based on the facts of each case. That's why we should not specify that the Director of Lands only exercises power as the landowner in the bill. Doing that would simply give rise to more disputes. Lease extension involves many interests and inevitably gives rise to disputes. My concern is whether we have effective administrative systems to protect registered owners, including those of Chotong land and those joint owners and co-owners of land. We also have to guard against the abuse of loopholes as a way to affect transactions. the government explained these issues that we raised and explained how we could deal with those problems. The government also proposed amendments to address concerns. Now, for opt-out memorandum, witnesses are needed, and a witness has to be a practicing solicitor. The court can also order the vacation of such opt-out memorandum when fraud or mistakes are involved. This bill makes life easier for people, and it also saves administrative tasks for the government. I'm grateful to Mr. Jeffrey Lam, who led the Bills Committee in scrutinizing the bill in detail. I also thank the Development Bureau and the Department of Justice for their dedication and professional work they have done in helping us navigate through the context and the complex bill. I support this bill second and third reading.
Mr. Rincon. Mr. Deputy, I rise to speak in support of the extension of government leases bill. As 2047 approaches, many people are beginning to be concerned about the extension of the leases in 2047. The absence of any extensions and it would have bearing on the duration of the mortgage. As a lawyer, I explain the leases to the clients. When it comes to 2047, people tend to direct a question at me that what's going to happen beyond 2047. Every time I hear questions like these, they would draw a blank. Since the last administration, there are so many professional bodies that expressed concerns about the extension of leases beyond 2047. I'm pleased to see that this current term of administration has addressed these concerns and tackled these very easily so that the financial sector, the businessmen, the members of the public won't be kept in the dark. For the leases that would expire in 2047, 6 years before the expiry, there would be the extension notices. So, is it okay for the administration to give longer notices? Now, this is the question that was raised at the Bills Committee. The government has balanced the certainties against the right or the power of the landlord. I think that it is appropriate arrangement to give the notice 6 years ahead of time. That would enable the government to deal with all these backlog of extension cases. Now, there is also the non-extension lists. There are certain leases that would not be extended. I hope that the administration would explain in no uncertain terms the policies behind the non-extension and how this operates, and more public education should be mounted in order to assuage public concerns. The bill is an attempt to put together a streamlined mechanism. There is no need to execute any of these. The government can rely on this bill and the Gazette to complete the extension. This is a user-friendly, wonderful policy. There is one point I'd like to make here at the Bills Committee, headed up by Mr. Jeffrey Lam. We have been very efficient in dealing with and discussing all these relevant issues. I'm glad that Mr. Lam has been so patient to allow members to ventilate their views. And what's noteworthy is that during the scrutiny of the bill, the officials from the Bureau have been receptive to our views. And in the CSAs to be debated, this represent a lot of sparks during the discussion. With these words, I support the bill. Mr. Edward Lau. Mr. Deputy, on behalf of the DAB, I speak in support of the extension of government leases bill. In this bill, the government worked on the basis of the 1997 land policy, and this bill is about the extension of leases, but the policy is kept intact. According to the Development Bureau's paper, from 2025 June to June 2047, there are 2,400 lots that will expire, and on the 30th of June 1997, 300,000 leases that would expire. Conventionally, the government would be executing leases with the lessees, and the government will be coming tremendous pressure, and the lessees will not be able to renew their leases ahead of time. So this streamlined mechanism has my support. Between 2025 and 2047, and there may not be a lot of leases to be handled, but this is the right time for the government to put in place this mechanism. Prior to this bill being announced, there has been a lot of speculation and rumors that are making their rounds about how the government is going to be recovering the leases upon expiry, and people will have to shell out a tremendous amount of money, and that has caused a lot of uncertainties, and there are so many problems in this regard. So the government is announcing this measure, streamlined measure for lease extension, is really a good idea because we can focus our attention on the economy. With the land lease becoming certain, we can have our resources put in the economic development. Many members mentioned the merits of this bill. There is this extension notices for the lease extension instead of just executing individual leases, and that would save a lot of precious resources and put things beyond doubt. And this is really praiseworthy. Under the chairmanship of Mr. Jeffrey Lam, and also after the deliberation of the Bills Committee, I think we can put this mechanism on a firm footing and get on with all the lease extension work, and the procedures will be justified. I'd like to share with members some of my sentiments in terms of lease extension. This will put things beyond doubt. This will introduce some certainty to the system. However, I think that the government should really work hard to make sure that land will be put to good use. We are here dealing with lease extension in this exercise. I appreciate that the government is resorting to this streamlined mechanism, but when it comes to land resumption, it would be a good idea for the government to streamline the procedures as well. Now, the government is going to be resuming land for the Northern Metropolis and the NDAs. For some reason, maybe there are problems with the leases. The LACO spend an awful long time dealing with the resumption. In some cases, the cases would be dragging on for 2-3 years before they see any compensation. So while the government is speeding up the resumption, the government should also be speeding up the compensation. Now, there is certain land that will be illegally occupied, and in some cases, for the Chotong land, there is an absence of any manager, and there are no descendants inheriting the land, and the leases cannot be approved, and that compromises the efficiency with which the land leases are handled in NT. So the government has to address all of these. I know that the government has the land registration ordinance and all the rest of the legislation. I will be pushing this here in this council to make sure that the lease extension will be put beyond doubt, and while at the same time we have to put the land resources to good use in Hong Kong. Once again, my grateful thanks to Mr. Jeffrey Lam and also the fellow members who have been spending an awful long time with the Development Bureau on this particular bill, and the Bureau has been very thorough in their explanation, and this is enough for us to support the bill.
Dr. So Chang Wing. Thank you, Deputy President. Starting from June next year until year 2047, leases of around 300,000 lots will expire, involving some 1.5 million owners. Now, the first batch of leases to be expired are mostly Chinese tenement buildings. Now, they come with fewer floors and flags, but there are a lot of complicated factors. In accordance with the existing mechanism, if each owner needs to sign a new lease, it will be extremely troublesome. It comes with prohibitively high administrative cost, not to mention cases involving multiple ownership. There will be indeterminable difficulties in operation. At the same time, uncertainty relating to lease extension will cause legal concerns among owners and investors. It is very difficult to conduct evaluation of properties on these premises. There would be worry about the continuity of mortgage or even re-entry enacted by the governments upon expiry, or the need to pay premium for lease extension. It would affect the judgment on transaction and affect and undermine the market's confidence. That's why a regularized, transparent, and streamlined lease extension mechanism will be beneficial to the business sector and enhance administrative efficiency, as well as bolstering our market structure. I fully support the extension of government's leases bill. It's my opinion that the bill is an extremely forward-looking piece of legislation. It highlights how much government values the views of the stakeholders. It has considered the practical needs in formulating legislation on lease extension to enhance the utilization of our land resources. In particular, the lead time of publishing the extension notice has been extended from 3 years prior to the expiry to 6 years before the expiry of the leases. With this change, owners will be given larger and higher certainty concerning the extension of leases. It will also give the government more time to consider the arrangements of extension. Now, the government will regularly publish extension notices of lease in the Gazette. This is an extremely convenient statutory mechanism for extending leases going to be expired. And also, under a negative list approach, a non-extension list will be published in the Gazette. It also contributes to the higher certainty. of land policy. Now, this can ensure highly efficient management of land resources and also giving a boost to the property market. It will be a win-win scenario. Still, the bill and the amendment is a macro piece of legislation to actually facilitate business and enhance our property structure. We need to formulate subsidiary legislation in detail to regulate the enforcement of the mechanism. I suggest the government to formulate the specific measures and practice guidelines concerning the procedures. For example, on identifying special purpose leases, and also ensuring that the compilation of the non-extension list is fair and transparent. By further enhancing the mechanism, the government can ensure that this historical bill is being enforced appropriately. And also the government should enhance the relevant services involving data sharing, especially the collection and dissemination of information and data concerning leases soon to be expired. There must be better publicity and education for the public. The government must make aware that as long as the land rent is paid, no premium would be required for an extension of lease. This would allay the concerns of the public that the leases are not going to be extended. The public must be educated to distinguish between leases extended and not extended. 3, the government must also step up communication with the stakeholders during the enforcement of the law. The government must keep closely monitoring the effects of the bill. And also, by listening to feedback of the public, the government should enhance the mechanism further. Now I thank Mr. Jeffrey Lam, the chairman of the Bills Committee, and the Bills Committee's members for their efforts. I so submit. Thank you. Mr. Louis Leung. Deputy President, the land policy announced in 1997 is the foundation on which the government deals with land issues. Now, according to the then government officials, it was said that land leases with certainty and continuity is crucial for the development of the property sector. Now, there are more than 1.37 million house owners. Now, whether the flat owners can have the leases extended without paying a premium would affect the market sentiment. Now, when the Pok Fulham Gardens lease was expired, a similar situation arose. More than 1,000 flat owners spent huge amounts of financial resources on dealing with the lease expiry issues. For those with a mortgage, they need to work out the mortgage plan with the banks. Now, the government has been stressing its capacity as landlord and its absolute decision power. Now, the Pok Fulham Gardens experience reminded the government how important it is to provide an extension mechanism with transparency and consistency, and for protecting the rights of title owners. As a result, I support the extension of government leases bill. It is a streamlined and orderly measure for extending leases in batches, which obviates the need to execute a new lease with each owner. Now, before introducing the bill, the government has consulted the sector. Now, I represent the Real Estate Developers Association of Hong Kong. Now, during the scrutiny of the bill's committee raised questions on and suggestions on how to enhance the mechanism from the public's perspective. They were accepted by the government. This includes adding a provision to require that the extension notices be published in Chinese and English language newspapers in Hong Kong, as well as the non-extension list. And also, the notices must be affixed in a conspicuous position or around the land concerned, so that the affected parties will be made aware of the non-extension of the leases. Second, for lessees who deliver an opt-out memorandum to opt out of a lease extension, the memorandum must be signed by a witness for better safeguard. 3, if the court is satisfied that the memorandum involves any fraud, mistake, or omission, the court can order the vacation of the memorandum's registration, while the lease will be extended according to the extension notice. The above 3 amendments moved by the government offers better safeguard for all parties in the extension process, and I support them. Still, is this a perfect piece of bill? Frankly speaking, I don't think so. The main purpose of the bill is to provide certainty for extension of leases. It is specified that the extension notice will only be published 6 years prior to the expiry, but I don't think that is long enough. During the consultation stage, the Real Estate Development Association already pointed out that normally the duration of leases lasts 20 to 30 years. In the international community, the indicator would be 12 years of lease. Whether it is residential or commercial properties, certainty concerning the extension of lease would affect the confidence of owners, investors, and even financial institutions. I suggested the government to make reference to the 1988 New Territories Leases Extension Ordinance and extend the lead time of notice to 9 years prior to the expiry of the lease. It's regrettable that the government only decided to extend the lead time from 3 years to 6 years. If the administration publishes the decision way ahead before of the expiry, it would definitely offer better safeguard to the interests of the investors and is beneficial to the development of our economy. On the other hand, according to the 1997 land policy, except for the 4 special leases, general purpose leases should enjoy the same treatment from the government. However, the bill doesn't cover special purpose leases for education, religious, and industrial purposes. Now, the lands departments will need to revisit the policy significance of each and every special purpose lease with the bureaus and departments before deciding to renew the lease. The lessee under these special purpose leases have been providing crucial community services for the community. They are not professional investor, still they are spending significant amounts of time to negotiate for lease extension with the government. Now, at the Bills Committee meeting, I once suggested to the government that special purpose leases, which does not require case-by-case consideration, should be dealt with by way of a schedule, so that these organizations, which have been serving the community for a long time, will be given certainty concerning the lease. It's regrettable that the administration did not take on board my suggestion. Still, I hope that the Secretary can make a promise today that, in general, the government would extend the leases for special purpose leases so that the organization can continue to serve the community with certainty. Now, without land, there cannot be wealth accumulation. For a title owner, the matter of lease is a significant matter. Land resources are an important resources in Hong Kong. To ensure that the resources are utilized adequately to bring about economic benefits for Hong Kong, the government must take a flexible and effective approach in protecting the resources. This is so for the extension of leases, and it is also true for conditions in the lease for protection of the landowner's rights. Now, we should make use of the existing legislative framework to regulate planning and environmental requirements and obviate the need to apply for modification of lease because of a minor change. It will ensure that the owners can tap the opportunity swiftly. Now, in terms of land management, the government should also adopt the same approach and ensure that the management is flexible and transparent. I support the passage of the bill as well as the amendments to be moved by the government.
Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I now call upon the Secretary for Development to reply, then the debate will come to a close. Secretary. Deputy President, I express my heartfelt gratitude to Mr. Jeffrey Lam, Chairman of the Bills Committee, the 14 members of the BC, stakeholders who provided written submissions, the Electrical Secretariat, the Legal Advisor, and the teams from the Department of Justice, the Development Bureau, and the Lands Department. Their effort has enabled the smooth deliberations of the extension of Government Leases Bill. I am also immensely grateful to the members who spoke and expressed their support for the bill. And they also shared key insights into the strategy about this bill, and we are also grateful for the great ideas they shared. Leases, along with the land and properties they cover, are the foundation essential for people's lives and economic development. The government has been using its power under the Basic Law and following its land policy announced in July 1997, when it exercises its absolute discretion in lease extension. General purpose leases cover those for ordinary residential, commercial, and industrial purposes, unless there are public interest considerations against the extension of certain leases. A lease is generally extended by the government for a term of 50 years without the need to pay an additional premium, but an annual rent equivalent to 3% of the prevailing rateable value of the property at the time of the annual rent assessment will apply. We need to cope with the large number of general-purpose leases expiring from 2025 onwards in a more efficient and orderly manner. Many such leases cover multi-story residential buildings involving numerous individual owners. After consulting Electrical's panel on development, relevant professional bodies, and stakeholders, we submitted this bill to Electrical on the 13th of December last year. The bill proposes a statutory standing mechanism for extending leases in an efficient and orderly manner through notices in the Gazette. This approach will bring certainty to the community and help to maintain the confidence of owners and investors. The bill provides that the Director of Lands will publish annual extension notices in the Gazette at least 6 years before each batch of leases expires. To extend these leases, unless a lease is on the non-extension list, a lease will be extended for a term of 50 years without the need to pay an additional premium, though an annual rent will apply. All pre-existing terms, interests, and encumbrances under the original lease will be carried forward after the extension, with the inclusion of conditions only essential for safeguarding the government's enforcement powers. There's this 6-year notice requirement, and this bill is expected to be passed and take effect in early July for leases expiring in or before 2030. The Director will publish all relevant extension notices in the Gazette on the day this legislation takes effect, that is, the 5th of July. Leases expiring after 2030 will be extended in batches through Gazette notices. Take, for instance, a lease expiring in 2031. The relevant extension notice will be published in the end of December this year. For leases to be extended, the statutory mechanism we propose will replace the current practice of having to execute a new lease with each owner. A lease can refuse extension of a lease. This should be extremely rare. Still, to cope with this kind of scenario, this bill also sets out the arrangement. Moreover, in line with the instruction of the Office of the Commissioner of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the HKSAR, the bill provides that when the representative offices of foreign consular missions or specified international organizations in Hong Kong own properties in the city for chanceries, residences of heads or of missions and mission staff, even if the applicable leases are on the HKSAR government's extension notices, these missions and bodies still have to follow the OCMFA's existing requirement by seeking its approval before the leases are extended. Members are well aware that this is a diplomatic matter. We are grateful to members for this. In fact, a requirement has been in place since 2022. It's a diplomatic requirement for foreign consulates and international bodies in Hong Kong to seek the OCMFA's approval before dealing in properties in the city. This practice is also in line with international diplomatic norms. The BC started its deliberations in January this year. When the work was concluded in May, 7 meetings had been held. Public submissions were invited. I am immensely grateful to BC members for their general support for the bill, which I agree is a welcome proposal. The bill will spare owners the cumbersome process of having to execute a new lease for each expiring one with the government. During the BC's deliberations, members delved into the legislative proposal and came up with many constructive ideas. They put themselves in the government's shoes by suggesting ways to ensure the bill will not compromise the government's full discretion over lease extension and to better protect the government's interests as an owner. Members also proposed ways to improve the publication of extension notices, better safeguards for other owners when one owner opts out of extension, and improvements through the drafting of certain provisions and the execution details of the new mechanism. This is a great example of the dynamic interaction between the current term government and LegCo. Just then, a member said, "Sparks flew, but those were positive sparks." Indeed, we have members from the legal profession, the business profession, mathematics teachers, or the surveying sector, and also LegCo members with frequent contact with the public. Members shared ideas. Those were thoughtful ideas. My team and I were deeply impressed. The government carefully considered members' ideas and adopted those suggestions. That's why we will move amendments. When we come to those amendments, I will elaborate on those points. Based on the BC's recommendations, the government should offer more certain messages to the market. Here, I want to say this once again. This bill only involves a way to the way general purpose leases are extended. It does not alter the land policy of July 1997. The bill does not affect the absolute discretion of the government over lease extension. As I said before, general purpose leases are generally extended by the government, except for certain leases denied extension due to public interest considerations. Experience shows such cases are extremely rare. During the debate just then, a member wondered why the bill expressly waived the payment of an additional premium instead of keeping the options open for the government to adjust the measure in the future. Let me point out that the bill is supposed to set out the law, bringing in a streamlined system to deal with expiring leases. We're not changing the current land or lease extension policy to ensure clarity and greater certainty. We see the need for the bill to state clearly the key terms for extension under the 1997 land policy, including the exemption of an additional premium if, in the future, the government and the community at that point have a thorough discussion and see a need to alter this approach, then we should leave it to that future government to have regard to the circumstances and consensus at that point to adjust the policy. We don't want to send out the wrong message at this point, which may compromise stability and affect Hong Kong's development. Last but not least, I want to point out that owners will not have their leases extended free of charge. This bill states that owners will still have to pay an annual rent at 3% of the property's rateable value. We fully agree with the BC and the members who spoke just then on the need for more publicity and education to help the stakeholders of the land and property market. This includes owners, banks, real estate agents, and investors to see how the new extension mechanism works. In particular, we should help the public and stakeholders to tell with certainty whether a lease is extended and how they can protect their own interests. On publicity, a range of measures are in the pipelines. The Lands Department will set up a dedicated website and a hotline for inquiries, create accessible leaflets, compile frequently asked questions, produce online promotional materials, and announcements in the public interest for radio stations. The information will be publicized by professional bodies, organizations, and the government's overseas and mainland offices. I hope LegCo members who come into contact with the public will also help us with this work. President, we are ready for the commencement of the ordinance upon Gazetto on the 5th of July. We will put out the first extension notices on that day to cover leases expiring from the commencement date to 2030. Publicity and education will be taken forward. I urge members to support this bill and all the amendments I will propose at the committee stage so that we can put in place the new extension mechanism soon to bring greater ease to the people and businesses in line with the community's expectations. This will create better conditions for our all-out effort to drive Hong Kong's economy. President, I so submit.
And I'll put a question to you that the extension of government leases bill be read the second time. Those in favor, please raise their hands. Those against? I think the question is, Agreed by majority of the members present, I declare the motion passed. Extension of Government Leases Bill. This council now becomes committee of the whole council to consider the extension of Government Leases Bill. Members may refer to the